today's guest is a supporting sponsor of Liberty in Finance.
Of course, as I said, Trump has got as it very clearly on the record, wanting to support the states' rights. And here we have it, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the US Constitution. Of course, it forbids any state to make its own currency because the Founding Fathers did not want to have lots of fiat currencies flying around. It says you may not use anything but gold and silver.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty in Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for January 27th through February 3rd, 2025, while supplies last. This week, backdated 1-ounce silver Austrian Philharmonics are just $2.85 over spot, one of the lowest prices we've had on a sovereign coin in years. Next, AU pre-1933 $20 gold St. Gaudens coins are just $50 over melt. We also have 90% constitutional silver or junk silver at just $1.69 over spot per ounce. We also have the 1/10 ounce UK Gold Britannia coin at just $29.99 over melt. And finally, 1 ounce gold Canadian maples are just $59 over spot. Again, one of the lowest prices we've had on gold sovereign coins in years. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty in Finance. We're delighted to have this returning guest. Jason Cozens is the CEO and founder of Glint, also Glint Pay. He joins us again to talk about the movement of the United States in their individual states that are standing up for legal tender status for gold and silver, and how it may be able to overcome what many see as an unjust capital gains tax being imposed by the federal government and the IRS on precious metals. Jason, thank you for coming back on Liberty in Finance.
Hi, Dunnigan. Thank you for inviting me again. I'm really excited to talk about this subject. I've kind of been reticent to talk about it until it got to this point, because now we're into what I call the second legislative session. This year just started a few weeks ago, and I've been seeing this incredible momentum building over the last really 2 years, a grassroots momentum, and but it's bursting out now. And I think obviously the Trump administration has given a bit of confidence to people that they're not going to get challenged by this at the federal level, because they've shown demonstrated clearly that they want to support the rights of states. But this is what we're about to talk about, is what everybody I think has been wanting. Do you want to have sound money? If so, it's in your hands right now. If you want to have sound money, you can get your legislators to vote for it. And this legislation, these bills are coming through now. They're being submitted literally today, yesterday, last week. And it's phenomenal what's happening. But yeah, I'm really looking forward. Thanks for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to talk about this subject.
Absolutely. We have talked with Patrick Holland of the Missouri Freedom Initiative. We've talked with soundmoney.org, and they've got a heat map of the United States that shows which states are leading the charge. It used to be 9 states. It was 14 states, and now it's 20 states. And they're not only doing things like getting rid of sales tax on precious metals, declaring the gold and silver as legal tender for enabling payment of taxes in that state, enabling a depository in some of those states, enabling people to requiring the state to reserve part of its nest egg, its endowment into gold and silver, for example. So there's a lot of movement, but the one sticky wicket has been capital gains. It seems nonsensical to many who really understand that gold is money to think that if you purchase it, which is a strange thing to do, but if you swap some of your Federal Reserve notes for real gold, and then by policy, the Fed destroys the value of the currency they said their policy is 2% per year, and they haven't been able to accomplish that. They're at like 3.6% per year, and John Williams from shadowstats.com says no, they're between 8 to 12, 14% per year. But they're destroying the value of the currency, and then they say, aha, now that you go to sell it, now you're selling it in our worthless things that we destroyed, and now we can claim that you've enjoyed a gain, and therefore we want a cut of the action. That seemed an unjust tax on the part of many observers, those who've thought about it carefully. And you were explaining to me a very important distinction that the IRS used when trying to make sure that gold and silver, when sold at a nominal gain, could be taxed at the collectibles rate, the highest capital gains rate of 28%. And what the truthful clarification with the new technology that's been enabled now, that multiple states are pressing to just get past that categorization so that it no longer applies and would no longer be appropriate to levy that sort of capital gains tax. It's a big deal because a lot of people who watch our channel have been stacking and accumulating precious metals for a long time with the anticipation that someday, for some need or opportunity, they might want to reconvert that back and liquidate that to be able to make a transaction, and are concerned about the capital gains implications. And there's even been some questions asked about if people had a Glint Pay card and could do transactional, how do they tally up and report their so-called capital gains at the end of the year? So those are two completely separate questions. But first, if we could stay on this gold vein, I will call it, of how Glint Pay is helping individual states that are leading the charge to get out of underneath the thumb of the IRS in this so-called collectibles category for precious metals.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think let's start with that. What has happened already? Because a lot of your viewers are very educated in the space, and they will already know that states like, for instance, Utah passed gold legal tender laws, for instance, in 2011. And the legislation said that gold and silver specie, and what that means is the gold and silver eagles that are minted by the federal government would be legal tender in the state. And I think there was a lot of excitement that might mean that effectively they're using Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution to authorize the currency, and therefore, as an authorized currency of the United States of America, it would not be subject to capital gains tax. Unfortunately, what the IRS said is that, look, the spirit of this clause in the Constitution is that it should be used as currency. And you can't pop into Starbucks or pay for your American Airlines flight with American eagles or silver eagles, gold or silver eagles. And they said, therefore, we classify them as collectibles. And actually, the Biden administration recently, just before they got kicked out, clarified this with a statement. It was really, I think, to do with CBDCs and Bitcoin and stuff, crypto. And they said, look, for something to be, transactional currency, which wouldn't be subject to capital gains tax, it needs to be both legal tender and transactional. And they would say, for instance, Bitcoin is transactional, but not legal tender. And they would say, for instance, our coins are legal tender, but not transactional. And what's special about this session and this movement is that because new technology like Glint enables gold to be used in transactions in real-time electronic payments within the existing financial services ecosystem, that now really what the states want to stand up and authorize is gold bullion that is transactional. And this is just, I never thought for 1 second when I had the idea for Glint after 2000 financial crisis that we would have governments getting behind this. I've even had small governments around the world asking us to launch in their country because, they want us desperately to help fight inflation or things like that. But here we have at the heart of America's, of the world's payment system, we have this happening. And what's really wonderful is that in your country, you have this federal state system, which is designed to balance each other out. The state is there to keep the Fed in check and vice versa. And it seems to me, I observe that the federal government recently has been getting maybe too much power. Now the states are coming back in. And of course, as I said, Trump has is very clearly on the record wanting to support the states' rights. And here we have it, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the US Constitution. Of course, it forbids any state to make its own currency because the founding fathers did not want to have lots of fiat currencies flying around. It says you may not use anything but gold and silver. So it's already a right. No one has to go and get that right. It already exists. They just need to, the state legislators just need to tell their departments, their civil servants, the treasurers to get on with and start using it. And at that point, it is believed, and it'll probably have to be a test case where a state pays a vendor or something like that, and the vendor pays a capital gain tax under protest. Then of course it will get tested, and it might have to go to the Supreme Court. But actually, I was speaking to somebody very high up in the U.S. central federal government, and they said, look, the US dollar is never going to lose its position as the medium of exchange for the world in any time soon, certainly not in our lifetimes. That was their opinion. But if people want to protect the purchasing power of their money, in other words, from a store of value perspective, and they want to be able to spend in dollars, then why shouldn't they be able to do that? We'll talk about that in a little bit in a minute. We've got some really interesting participants in this movement that don't just include enthusiastic people like me and you around gold. It includes some of America's, I would say, financial royalty. So let's get on to it. Shall I start with, I've got a presentation and make it easy.
Certainly, go right ahead.
Okay, so so look, US states, transactional gold, and that's the key. You know, this isn't just making gold legal tender, this is making transactional gold legal tender. And it is an economic justice initiative because this is seen to be helping the everyday people, which is why as well, a lot of the sponsors of the bills are Republican, but a lot of the co-sponsors are Democrat because they see that a lot of the people they care about, not that Republicans don't, a lot of the people they care about have a focus on are the ones that will benefit most from this type of initiative. They want to make, this initiative to use the states use their constitutional power to leverage electronic transactional gold platforms to enhance the long-term economic stability for citizens, businesses, and the state itself. And of course, the state has a responsibility to look after the residents and look after the money. And they have things like rainy day funds, and they're looking ahead into the future and what it looks like. And
I want to interrupt right there, if I may, because I want to underscore that aspect. We've spoken with our viewers several times about how they individually can, quote unquote, become their own central banks by taking funds out of the banking system, out of dollars, and putting them into real sound money, because that will help protect from the ravages of currency debasement and inflation and preserve their purchasing power. And then just recently, we've started to elevate that discussion up and saying, and guys, by the way, think of it, all of us, there are among us, we either individually or collectively depend on stewards of endowments, whether it's churches or hospitals or higher education institutions or government, smaller, municipal or state government bodies, where there are pools of reserves that are being wasted away by, in other words, the destructive currency debasement that's been led by the federal government has been cannibalizing and destroying the value of these endowments at many levels, insurance companies, pension funds, etc., not the least of which is people's individual savings accounts. But here you're describing it at the state level. So absolutely, states and counties and municipalities all have a vested interest and a duty to protect and do wise and judicious and prudent things to protect the value of their people's, the people's money. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I've been very privileged to be involved in this. I didn't know anything about this until about a year ago. I read that in the Texas Senate, during discussions about transactional gold legislation, they said, once we pass a law like this, we're going to need a platform like Glint. And, I got in touch with people and I found out that it wasn't just one state, as I said, it was 20 states. And actually, I found out yesterday, 3 more states interested, 23 states is phenomenal. And and this is the gift I've been privileged to be able to give, is that when you go into a state legislature environment, the state house or the Senate, you speak to the civil servants like the finance department or the treasury department. The first thing they're thinking is, what are you talking about? A transactional gold platform? How would that work? This is really complicated. What, you want to get it up and running within the year? Hold on a second. We're going to have to think about this. How are we going to change our systems? This is a nightmare. And then I say, hey, is there somewhere we can just get a coffee? And we go and get a coffee and I pay for a coffee with gold. And they go, wow, we got to get this done as quickly as possible. And I feel that's my gift. I've been able to show people this is easy. Don't worry about the technology, that's already been done. You guys just need to pass the legislation. So very pleased to be able to do that. And I'm going to put some of these basic things on, which all your viewers who normally subscribe to you will know all about. But I think this video is going to get watched by other people who don't necessarily know. And they say, well, what are the states worried about? Well, of course, they're worried about the government debt, nearly $37 trillion worth. And of course, our friend Andy Sheckman would always say, let's just get $1 trillion into perspective. 1 trillion seconds ago was 31,600 years ago. So it's a huge amount of money, and it's going up 1 trillion every 3 months, I think. So, even if the Trump administration can shave 1 trillion off, it's just going to stop it going up by 3 months worth. Like, this is out of control. And the US Senate itself unanimously passed a resolution 600, which of course never happens at the Senate. Nothing ever happens unanimously, recognizing that national debt is a threat to national security and realizing that deficits are unsustainable, irresponsible, and dangerous, and therefore commits to preventing the looming financial crisis. Well, I don't think they can prevent it, but what states are doing is saying we can insulate ourselves from the effects of this. They're worried about inflation. Of course, we've seen it ravaging through the economy in the world. They're worried about the financial system and, what things could happen in the world that might affect that. A lot of your viewers are worried about that too. They're worried about military conflict, the doomsday clock. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Have you heard about the doomsday clock? They've just moved it closer to midnight again. This is the closest to midnight it's ever been, because they're worried about, nuclear proliferation. They're worried about geopolitical unrest. They're worried about AI, etc. And of course, the wealth gap. And this affects everybody. This is apolitical. This is cross-party. The money supply, those closest to the money supply, closest to the ability to get hold of this hose pipe of money that's been pumped into the economy, they benefit disproportionately to those further away. And so we've got a terrible situation where, if I just bring up, you'll know this one, this is the value of gold going up, the dollar depreciating by 83% in my lifetime. But this one, this is the other one where, the money, the 20,000 grams it cost to buy a house, or the $20,000 it cost to buy a house in 1970, the year I was born. The dollars now don't even get you the down payment. The gold, of course, buys you 3 houses. Those 3 houses haven't got any bigger on the inside. These houses, it just really shows up that money has become worth less. But this one, as well as this economic justice thing, look at that graph. The green line is the amount of money printed into the system, and the red line is the increasing of the net worth of the top 0.1%, the very, very richest in society. They're benefiting from that money supply, whereas everybody else doesn't. And of course, you've talked about the injustice around that, and the supreme injustice about taxing you just for the privilege of maintaining your purchasing power with gold is an absolute travesty. So yes, money printing fuels inequality, lifts the billionaires whilst leaving people behind. As one of the state legislators said recently, I think he said, it's the difference between the have-nots and the have-yachts, which I'm going to start adopting. And of course, again, you all buy gold, but for those who might watch this video, you might be surprised to hear that 79% of Americans and your fellow Americans are either have bought gold or considering buying gold, and nearly 20% of Americans think it is the most important investment that they've got. So, and again, going back to maybe before Trump, people kind of scratch their heads and go to me, this is never going to happen. How could that be possible? It's like, hang on, this is in the US Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of this Constitution says that no state shall make anything a currency, by the way. Don't want to be, having lots of fiat currency sprouting up across America, except for gold and silver. So, they're allowed to use gold and silver as money. And if anybody is worried about the phrase coin, there's been numerous times Supreme Court hearings that have led to clarification that coin is kind of definition of a weights and measure. That at the end of the day, as long as it's gold, that's the most important thing for this. And they're passing laws for transactional gold as currency, and now, as I said, 20 states working to do this. And then the primary one, I think, of building momentum across the US is authorizing a transactional gold platform. So enabling gold to be used as money in electronic payments in normal e-commerce. Really, what they're looking to do is effectively start the building of a foundation that can lead to a gold-based financial services ecosystem. Of course, this is in conjunction with the dollar, as everybody at the central bank keeps telling me. It's going to remain the main medium of exchange on the planet, and that's all fair enough, but it allows people to be able to save in gold and to be able to spend it when they want to, and hopefully not be taxed. And some of the legislations that's being passed specifically mention that the tax This must not be taxed either by states or by the federal government. They want taxpayers in some states to be able to pay their taxes in gold. They want the employees to have the option to be paid in gold. They want suppliers to have the option to be asked to be paid in gold. And of course, this might not all happen in the first legislative session. This is a lot to get people's heads around. Sometimes the finance departments of these states might be worried about what changes they need to make to their CRM systems, their accounting systems. And I think this is why, in some states, there'll be a more cautious approach and more like what I call minimum viable product approach to this. In other states, they're going to be like, hey, we're going to do the whole thing. Let's get the permission. Let's get going on this. And look at these states. This is not the whole list. I mean, phenomenal what Utah did. Utah, I'll talk about some of their legislation they already passed last year. Texas, of course, already, and they didn't just pass legislation, they built their own gold depository in preparation for all of this next iteration on this movement. They've submitted new legislation already for this legislative session. This is happening right now. So bills were submitted over the last few weeks in January. This is in play. This session doesn't last long. In some states, a lot of states, it'll all be over by June. We're already into February. And so this is really important why you all have got to listen to this. You want sound money legislation. You want to be able to have that. You've got to back this. In Florida, they're already working on it. Louisiana have already passed gold legal tender laws it's phenomenal. I mean, the list goes on and on. I can't keep track of it. Got Ohio, North Dakota, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Texas. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And it's phenomenal to see it happening. Utah, just an example, Mike Schultz, Utah Speaker of the House. This is leadership saying it is important for Utah citizens and businesses to have a variety of options for storing and exchanging the value of their labors, including alternative payment systems and precious metal investments. This isn't just some representative who had an idea and loves gold, people like you and me. This is senior leadership. And Utah last year, they put legislation in that instructed the treasurers to start buying gold for their reserves. Believe it or not, the states don't have any gold in their reserves. Everybody else does. Individuals like, your listeners have gold. The central banks around the world are buying more gold than they've ever bought, but the states didn't have any. So Utah is already buying gold on a monthly basis now. Great for that to see. And they instructed the Treasury Department to do a study into the role of precious metals to advance the precious metals industry and the economy in Utah. And as I said, you've got to look at some of the people that are behind this and involved in this. This is including some of the titans of America's financial industry. Gary Crittenden, the former CFO of American Express. And this will blow most people away. Randall Quarles, former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve. And they've come out with recommendations, and they've said, and you can watch the videos, they're saying, look, why shouldn't people be able to save their money in gold and be able to use it in transactions without having to be taxed just to maintain their purchasing power? And we should, and this is a recommendation in the report, you can all check it out, type in Utah State Treasurer gold bills, something like that. And you'll see it. And it says, we recommend that the state authorizes a gold-based transactional platform. And the other considerations include payment with gold and silver for taxes, state employees, vendors, and other stakeholders. This is phenomenal, which is what's happening in Utah. And of course, just to pick another example, Florida, Andy Schectman's state, Jimmy Patronis, the Florida CFO. I mean, Florida itself is an economy that ranks with some of the biggest countries in the world. And it's, he says gold and silver have been trusted assets for thousands of years, and it makes perfect sense to use them as legal tender. Use them as legal tender. And I'm launching this study, he says, to determine the best way to get it done. This man fully gets it. And I know that he's got a lot of support in Florida. I think the Republican Party of Florida last summer said that transactional gold is the 6th most important thing on their list of things to get done this legislative session. He goes on to say, I've also included in the framework of the study that gold and silver cannot be taxed as property for the purposes of using them as money. So yeah, their study focus is going to be on gold and silver used as currency for goods and services, and transactional gold and silver exemption from CGT tax. So big shout out to Jimmy Patronis and the team in Florida. But this is happening across America. And, some of you will be like, okay, but hang on a second. Jason just came on a few weeks ago and said, you should all, download Glint and get on your own personal gold standard. And well, if Glint already exists, why do we need the state's involvement? And for two very important reasons. Number one, citizens need to have their rights to use gold and silver as legal tender protected. We've seen in the past that federal government can get in the way of things and confiscated gold once. If a state, though, authorizes this, then the federal government can't do that. Glint can't ever battle the federal government, but of course a state could, and suddenly a compact of states definitely would. And then the next thing, of course, is that only the state can go to the Supreme Court and advocate for the IRS to remove collectibles, the collectibles capital gains tax on this. So that's why it's important for the states to do this. This is why the states are doing this. I just want to say, though, if the state authorizes a transactional gold platform, it might not be that all gold around the country is free from capital gains tax when and if that eventually comes to be with the IRS. It might be that they say, well, if gold in an ETF hasn't been authorized by the state of Texas, therefore you still pay capital gains tax on it. They might say, well, your gold and silver eagles are still collectible. So, we don't know what's going to happen with that. But if the state authorizes a currency, then I'm very confident. A lot of the attorney generals at various states around the country seem to be very confident about this. And as I said, even people high up in the central banking world seem to think this shouldn't be a problem. And I think just recently, I don't know, you tell me if you've heard this as well. Have you heard anything about Trump saying he doesn't think that people should pay capital gains tax on crypto?
I'm not up on that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not either. But I think, I mean, that's the kind of thing he would do. But of course, what we're talking about is the states on so much more stronger ground because it's already in the Constitution. And then, last but not least, what are you going to do about it? If you're listening to this, look, I know, a lot of people have been discussing on the comments. A lot of people signed up for Glint accounts. And by the way, I'll say a big shout out to all those people that did, and they've learned about it, and they're learning themselves by opening an account. That's all I can do is encourage you to try it out and see what you think. But of course, it's very important to people to own physical metal. And I understand the saying, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. But we live in a society that is run by electronic payment system. We have that system in place. And if you want to be able to, Thea's law, not Gresham's law says that bad money pushes out good. I'm not a fan of that. Thea's law said good money pushes out bad. And that's because why? You don't any longer have to have any bad money because, of course, with Glint, you can use it in electronic transactions anywhere in the world. You don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to accept a gold eagle or not. You don't have to worry about how you pay for a small payment in small denominations. We've made that really easy for you. So I do encourage you to look at that. But what you need to do, bigger than Glint, much more important than Glint, is that you've got to I think you need to really think about whether or not you want to have sound money legislation passed in your state and therefore your country. Do you want to be part of that army that participates in creating a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which is effectively the second authorized currency of the United States of America, owned by the state at the state level? Do you want to do that? If you want that, I don't know when the next time opportunity is going to come round. If you want that, then I think you need to support find out if your state is involved in this, find out who the state bill sponsor is, support them, send them an email, tell them that you support them, get onto your state reps, ring them up. The state reps' telephone numbers are all available. Get on the phones, get on the phones to the governors, make sure they don't veto this, and go to transactionalgold.com. It's run by some folks in Texas. They're really great people. They're one of the movement that have been trying to help make this happen in America. And transactionalgold.com is trying to keep up with the progress. I think they're looking to update what's going on at the state level very soon on their website. But that's a good resource for people to get behind.
And I want to also reiterate the soundmoney.org website can also give you contacts at your individual state level on what's actually currently being acted on in your state and who you can reach out to support that. I wanted to follow up on several points that you raised here, Jason. One is about bad money. You said about choice. There were several who were speaking out from a leadership position saying people should have a choice of how they want to save the fruits of their labor, the hard work that they've done. They've earned something. They want to save it. We shouldn't be forcing them to save it in something that is losing value or that they have to pay tax on. That's been described as people wanting to hold on to sound money, but other people would like to be able to use that you've talked about the difference between Gresham's law about bad money pushes out good versus the phenomenon of good money pushing out bad. Can you describe both of those to us and why it's important?
Yeah, so Gresham's law says that bad money, i.e. dollars, pushes out good, i.e. gold. But there's an alternative, which I get a lot. People say, oh, why would I want to spend any of my gold? I want to, and the response to that is, well, why do you have any bad money at all? Now, I know that things are priced in dollars. That's probably the main reason, right? But, one of my first investors, actually one of my oldest investors, I think he's in his 90s, said to me, Jason, what I love about Glint is it allows me to put my ready money into gold. Ready money is something you need to be able to spend at a moment's notice. And Glint isn't yet a total replacement for the kind of payment systems you find at banks. We're definitely not a bank. We don't lend any money. We don't lend assets. We're not part of that. But the payment systems that exist there, the ability to make utility payments, for your utilities, your auto pay, the ability to do third-party payments, that's all stuff that we have in our pipeline. And I would like to think that in the next year or so, Glint would be a viable alternative to the kind of payment systems you're having to sign up to, where you have to unfortunately put your money at risk. As you all know, we've seen some banks unfortunately go down. Nobody wants that. Banks play a very important role, I think, in the economy, but people need the choice, as you've said. And what Glint is doing is on a mission and a vision to give everyone an equal opportunity to prosper and introducing a gold-based payment system to the world. Look, guys, we're not JP Morgan, nor do I think you'd want us to be, but we're doing the best we can. I think we've raised quite a lot of money in order to build this, a lot of effort, a lot of tears and sweat, but eventually it will get there. My point being is that if you can save your money in sound money, and when you need to spend it, you can at a moment's notice, whether that's a medical bill, whether that's education, whatever it is. Or even a lot of our customers are getting used to using some of the gains they're getting from their gold on a regular basis. You've mentioned before that there's been, I think, the biggest, in the West anyway, the biggest levels of redemptions when it comes to gold. And we've seen that. We've seen that at Glint. For the first time ever, there's as many sales as there are buys. But for the last 5 or 6 years, it's been mainly buys. I do want to point out to people, not everybody knows this, spend with your card and you don't even have to pay to sell your gold. Think about that. When you come to if you want to pay for something, normally you have to sell your gold, you pay a premium, and then you use the dollars to buy. Well, with Glint, if you just use your card, we sell your gold automatically. You don't pay anything to do that for that. You just get the normal rate, wholesale rate, and you pay for something. We do that because the merchant gives us 1%. And every merchant in the world pays MasterCard X%, maybe it's 3 or something like that. And we get 1% of the transaction. So we don't need to charge you for that. But where else can you get that kind of de minimis spread? Nowhere.
Yeah, the phenomenon that you were describing is something that we've discussed with our viewers recently, and that is for the last 4 years, more than 95% of our sales were in fact individuals buying and amassing, stacking gold and silver. Now we've seen just in the last 3 months or so a remarkable shift to where a significant, much more significant portion, half or more of transactions are people either selling the back or swapping. Sometimes it's because they have to liquidate for things like paying taxes, or there is an opportunity to buy a property or that sort of thing. And this has been a profitable savings account for them that's actually maintained their value. So they're using it as what it has always meant to be, and that is a private, out-of-bank system savings account that holds its value. But in any regard, the friction, the potential for turnaround losses on that buy, hold, and then eventually sell, people are interested in ways of minimizing that. And we should, if you have any further comments on that, that's fine. But and I wanted to move on to this idea that there are different piles of different categories of use. And we talked about that briefly. When people own gold, there's a saying in the preparedness world where we came from. If they say 2 is 1 and 1 is none, meaning when you're trying to prepare for something, you better have a spare just in case. You better have a plan B, that kind of thing. Well, in precious metals and physical ownership, just as the old saying is, possession is 90% of the law, they take it further in precious metals and say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And there's always concern about counterparty risk, whether it's in a vault, whether it's, that's why people are trying to get out of the banking system or sometimes out of IRA, retirement accounts, because they just don't like these layers and layers of either market risk, systemic banking risk, government oversight, IRS changing the rules, tax rates rising and lowering, completely outside their control. They'd like to have more personal control over their financial futures. What a radical thought. But in this case, being able to know that a portion of your metals are in your own, either in personal possession or in vault storage under your personal name. That's all they are, is they're just for holding and storing. That's one thing. But that is not readily, as you said, it's not ready money. It's not ready for you to use on a moment's notice. It takes sometimes days or even weeks to mobilize that, sometimes ship it across the country, package it up, insure it and everything if you're going to do a buyback and liquidation and get ready for a real estate closing, that kind of thing. But if you're going to go down to the coffee shop and buy coffee, that's not the money you use for that. And this question often is raised by people who call us, especially when the banks were failing in rapid succession, not too long ago. They were saying, how much of my funds should I leave in the bank? And the answer often revolved around, well, you need to have some ready funds to pay your bills. You don't want to run yourself you don't want to be so illiquid that you can't make your mortgage payment or your rent payment or your tax payment this month or this quarter. So you've got to have some funds to do that. But this bridges that gap. It says, instead of just all or nothing, you don't have to keep all your cash obviously in the bank, but maybe you can keep even less in the bank if you have a way of transacting against your ready gold. And I think that's what you were pointing out, is that this is a third place that's in between those two, that gives you the inflation protection, and you're outside the banking system for your asset, and yet you have instantaneous ability to transact, which is something you can't say about your private personal stack.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you really got to compare this against traditional payment systems and your gold. There's benefits and there's challenges with any solution. But by design, Glint doesn't lend your gold or your money out. There's no derivatives involved like there is with other traditional payment systems. It's not losing its purchasing power in the same way. Of course, the price of gold can go up and down, generally up though, as the value of the purchasing power of the dollar goes down. And of course, custody is being trusted to a third party rather than being on your own person. Of course, there's risks with that too. People can get burgled and stuff like that. But I think it's just, as you said, it's another weapon in the fight that we all have against systemic risk within the financial system and against systemic destruction of our purchasing power. And I'd like to think that we're offering people a utility that they can't get anywhere else. We don't know of any other solution in America that offers the ability to use gold in real-time electronic transactions without having to sell it in advance. We're not, there's not like a cryptocurrency. There's no token that sits between you and your ownership of your gold. It's not like an ETF. There's no share that sits between you and it's your gold. And we design it the best way we can. And look, I would love feedback from your audience. If they've got any ideas, put them in the comments and stuff. We're here to build something that you guys want. And we generally get lots of favorable responses. I think 4.6 or 7 out of 5 on Trustpilot. Lots of happy people, but we do like feedback. Effectively, we're trying to build this as a solution to a problem that's out there, and we would love that feedback.
I wanted to remind people that if you do decide to try out Glint Pay and download the Glint app on your phone, you'll be able to get, if you use the keyword Liberty, that's Liberty, Liberty. Can you guess where that came from in Liberty and Finance? You'll be able to get $10 off. So you'll get your MasterCard, physical plastic MasterCard mailed to you without having to pay the $10 fee. So if you use the keyword Liberty when you open your Glint Pay account, and happy to be able to help enable that. And also I'm delighted to see, you're there right now working with state legislatures to get it done. It's great because we've been working with groups that are trying to get this done for years. It's great to see this technical solution, financial technological solution being brought to help facilitate getting it done at the state level. And it's not to replace people's physical, private collections of gold or silver that they need for their whatever, generational security, etc. It's so that you can have some ready transactional ability outside the banking system and outside the dollar that doesn't depreciate with the dollar. So glad to have that opportunity. If people wanted to find out more, or you're about to chime in, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. A lot of the comments in the threads came around capital gains tax. They said, hang on, how are we going to work out, you've talked about capital gains tax at the state level and wanting to get abolished, but how do we deal with this capital gains tax, especially if we're using the card a lot and lots of transactions? Well, if you simply bought a little bit of gold, maybe done one sell, you could just download the spreadsheet for free from your app. You could work it out yourself maybe, or you can do what most people do. You pay at the end of the year $45 to have a report generated by one of the world's biggest accountancy firms, KPMG. They will get all the data which we send them, anonymous data. They crunch it and they work out what your capital gain or loss is, and they send you back a report, and you can use that for your tax submissions. Something that actually, we're coming up to that time of the year again, a lot of people are doing on Glint. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible, recognize it was a friction, and we've solved it.
And it's possible, and perhaps even probable, if this wave continues of these states standing up for people's rights, that this may become greater simplification in the future if this gets abolished, that transactional gold should not and shall not and therefore will not be subject to future capital gains tax. That hasn't happened yet. That'll probably be a decision of the Supreme Court when that finally gets contested between the states that are working hard on behalf of their people and the federal government. But we know who we're cheering for. So thank you for being in the corner of those who are trying to reestablish, to claw back some freedom and some choice for individuals in the face of unreasonable and I would say immoral overreach by the federal government. Thank you for that. And if you want to find out more about, if people want to reach out directly, they can write questions in the description underneath this video. And I saw you were active in responding to people's questions previously. Thank you for that. If people want to reach out directly to someone at Glint Pay and find out more, what should they do?
Yeah, the best thing to do is to go to the website. There's a chat function on the website. You can ask questions. They can email client services and ask their questions. So plenty of opportunity to get any questions answered. Obviously, as you said, put descriptions in below. I just encourage you, just download the app. Download it now. As you said, if they type in Liberty during the onboarding process. So we had a lot of people last time who said that we didn't get the free card because, can you still hear me, by the way? My headphones, I think, have just gone.
Yes.
Hold on a sec, I'll take those off. They just bear with me. I'm going to make sure I can still hear you after this. Can you just say something so I check?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
I'm going to have to change my speaker to be MacBook Pro. Give me a test.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
I think we're nearly finished anyway. I can't hear you, but listen, this is the important thing. A lot of people got in touch with client service and said, I didn't get my free card. And it's because they hadn't typed in Liberty during the onboarding process. So when you come to onboard and you have to put your details in, put Liberty in when it says something about referral code or promo code. Put that in so we don't have to manually deal with that with you afterwards. But I want to say a big thank you to all those people who signed up. It's great to have your viewers getting enthusiastic and trying Glint out. Just to take you through the process very quickly, when you download and register to put yourself on your own personal gold standard with this, then you have to register, you have to give us your details. We have to comply with all the, money transmitter, anti-money laundering rules in America. That's why we'll need your address, your name, your date of birth, your social security number. Everything is dealt with in a very private way. We don't share that information with anybody. We become subject to the kind of cybersecurity rules that the banks have, which are very, very robust. And then when you get through that, you'll have to buy some gold. It costs a lot for us to onboard you. And so we just ask you to commit to buying a small amount of gold. There's a few options. You can select to enter any amount, and then you're in. You have the opportunity to be able to save gold, but also spend it when you want. And you can buy as little as 1 cent's worth of gold. You can buy millions of dollars worth of gold, all safe and stored in the vault and insured by Lloyd's of London. And I just encourage you to go out there, play with it, use it, show it to people, and show how easy this is. And I think that's the great thing, is when you ring up your legislator, you say, I already use a system. It's so easy. All you need to do is turn up to the bill vote and vote. You got my vote if you give me your vote. That's when you want to ask them.
Just reminding everyone that the gold he said is stored in the vault is currently stored in Brinks in Zurich, Switzerland. And they're looking at Brinks in Salt Lake City as an add-on, hopefully this year. So we are grateful for your presence here. Jason, again, on behalf of all of our viewers, thank you for joining us in Liberty and Finance.
Thank you, Dunnigan.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for January 27th through February 3rd, 2025, while supplies last. This week, backdated 1-ounce silver Austrian Philharmonics are just $2.85 over spot, one of the lowest prices we've had on a sovereign coin in years. Next, AU pre-1933 $20 gold St. Gaudens coins are just $50 over melt. We also have 90% constitutional silver or junk silver at just $1.69 over spot per ounce. We also have the 1/10 ounce UK Gold Britannia coin at just $29.99 over melt. And finally, 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are just $59 over spot. Again, one of the lowest prices we've had on gold sovereign coins in years. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.